Hi, I am Jeffrey Wernick, and I'm happy to be hosting another pod shoot. And I'm very happy to have my friend Derek as a guest today. Let me give you a little bit of background on how Derek and I met. We've been friends for not a very long term, but I think we've become good friends in a short period of time. Uh, I'm
Yes.
someone who has not really been politically active, but I had some hopes that Bobby Kennedy would be a very different candidate uh, than traditionally being offered by Republicans and Democrats. And so I decided to support Bobby's campaign. I actually hosted a lunch for him in New York, and it was a great time. He stayed for about 2.5 hours with a group of about 25 people. I hosted, and we had a great conversation. People really liked Bobby. I never checked how many of my friends wrote him checks, but because I don't interfere with that, I just provide the introduction, and then it's up to them and him to work things out. But I don't ever pressure people. So then I heard that Bobby was hosting another event, or somebody was hosting an event for Bobby in uh, in San Antonio, and so I said, "Oh, gee, let me go to that event. I'll get to see Bobby again, and maybe meet some nice, interesting people." Uh, the only problem was that you had to pay to go to the event. I already maxed out, so and I don't believe in PAC giving. I only give money to a candidate. I don't give to PACs. I think they corrupt politics. So I think the only way people should be able to contribute to politicians is directly to their campaign, and you bet on the candidate. You give the candidate the money, and the candidate controls that. This other form of PACs and whatever, I think it just corrupts politics. So I don't want to be somebody that uses my money to corrupt politics. So for that reason, I never make any PAC contributions. And so I called up people from Bobby's staff, and I said, I'd love to go to this event, but unfortunately, I've already maxed out. I said, let's get back to you. And like 2 days later, they called back, and sure, Bobby would love to see you, and come on up to the event. So I'm at the event, and Derek and I were sitting in close proximity to each other, and we began a very interesting conversation. At least I found it interesting, and so we've been friends ever since. And I'm really happy to have Derek on. One is Derek will be speaking about a topic that I'm almost completely ignorant on, so I'm going to let him talk about his background and what he does. But there's a lot of I know the history of BitChute is that when there was a blackout or brownout of information regarding COVID, uh, when the major platforms were all being having content moderation, proxy through Fauci, that one of the havens for people to go to, one of the go-to places for information that was not subject to any blackouts or brownouts or censorship or throttling or shadow banning was BitChute. And I'm very proud that at a moment, when the American people deserve to have unfiltered information so they could decide for themselves rather than having Fauci decide for them, that BitChute stood out amongst all of the platforms as being, the go-to place. So, given the fact that there's so many people interested in this topic, and I tend to not have guests on it because it's not a topic I necessarily have a comparative advantage talking about. So I decided to invite my friend Derek and get started with the conversation. With Derek, who has ideas that are very transformational ideas of how we can spend less money on healthcare and have a much healthier society. So it is possible, and my conversations with Derek have been convincing, at least to me, that it really is possible that we could spend significantly less on healthcare, and while spending significantly less, have still much better healthcare outcomes. So Derek, why don't you take it from here? So I've spoken enough.
That's great. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. And Jimmy, kudos to BitChute. Freedom of information is an essential, the free discussion of just about anything is, I believe, an essential component of any healthy community. And so thanks for offering that. So I'm a medical doctor, conventionally trained medical doctor, went to med school in Dallas at UT Southwestern and did residency in emergency medicine there at Parkland Hospital, a great place to train in emergency medicine. We used to call it a knife and gun club, because in emergency medicine, you want to treat really, really sick patients. And so you learn how to deal with emergencies. So, board certified in emergency medicine. My first life as a doctor was doing hospital emergency room medicine. And I started my first clinic in 2006 in an effort to reinvent the system of delivering emergency care to our community. So that was my first life. And I still have several businesses in the emergency care space. The only thing that's working in medicine currently is acute care medicine. So if you have a knife in your neck or you have a pneumonia, you want the American healthcare system because it works. And we're very good at helping people survive from heart attacks and strokes and acute traumatic injuries, acute infectious illnesses. Other than that, everything else is broken in medicine. Top to bottom, side to side, back to front, beginning to end. The medicine we do is wrong. The way we deliver it is wrong. The way we pay for it is wrong. The way we teach it is wrong. So this next portion of my life is what I call the reinvention of medicine project.
So maybe could it be said, Derek, that we don't have a healthcare system. We only have a sick care system, but not a healthcare system.
Yes, and we really don't even have a good one of those. It's true. We don't. And I can talk about this for hours. We can see where the conversation goes, but the model that we use in every country, actually, every country in the developed world uses what I call the acute care model of disease. And when you use the wrong model, you'll always get the wrong solution.
Right.
So you know this well from all of your work, economic models, whatever it is, if
garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so the acute care model is very good at treating acute disease, but it is the wrong model if you're dealing with complex or chronic disease or prevention of disease or any complex illness. And so something as simple as high blood pressure, which is a chronic complex disease, using the acute care model, which is the acute care model is simplified basically. What's the name of the condition and what's the drug or the device or the surgery for the condition? That is the shortest explanation of the acute care model. So if you have high blood pressure, you get high blood pressure pills. Okay, but that has nothing to do with why a person has high blood pressure. And so the wrong model is fix the problem, acute care model. The right model is why is this happening? Mm-hmm. So that's the medicine that we do, right? Doctors in this country are not even trained to think about why people have a condition. So, that's the foundational thing. We have a sick care model that's broken medically, it's broken economically, it's broken educationally in every single way, and it's not worth saving. That's why I'm creating a new one.
Why don't you? Well, before we get into what you're creating, which I love to hear about, and I'm sure everyone who is going to watch this will also love to hear about it. I'd like to first talk about COVID. Okay. People, at the time COVID occurred, you and I didn't know each other then. If I would have been knocking on your door saying, what should I be doing? What were you telling people to do? And what do you think should have been Fauci telling people to do? And what do you think should have been our policy regarding COVID? And one of the things that's a constant polemic on BitChute is the discussion of the utility or disutility of the vaccines. So if Trump would have called you rather than Fauci and said, I have my dream team right here in Derek. So and you had now the microphone and was speaking to the American public, what would you have said?
Wow. Well, you're just going to throw me right in the pit, aren't you?
Is that an unfair question?
No, it's a great question. I hesitated from the very beginning. Nobody's ever heard of me because I didn't speak out about this, because everybody who spoke out about it got their head cut off or shot in the back, just demoralized, demagogued, right? So, COVID is a great example. And actually, my book that's coming out in June, I tell a story about a patient of mine, because COVID perfectly exemplifies the issue, at least a portion of this issue. Because when you went to the hospital with sick, severe COVID, what happened? The doctors in the hospital could easily name the condition you had, right? You've got COVID-19. But then what did they do? There wasn't an approved medication, right? So there was nothing in the acute care model. There was nothing to treat these patients with. And
were any of your patients asking you about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine?
Yeah, so I treated lots of COVID patients. I prevented lots of COVID, and I saw critically ill patients in my office with COVID. And I had a 99.9% full recovery rate. I only had one person that died in my patient population, and that's because that they didn't do what I asked them to do. That's a long story. But, COVID is like most things, even acute illness is somewhat of a complex disease. So to answer your question very briefly, what I did for patients when they had severe COVID was I used my model, which is I asked the question, why is this person sick? Right? And, it begs the question, why do 10 people get exposed to the same virus? 9 of them have mild illness or no illness at all, and 1 of them has severe illness. Why is that? It's not because of the illness. It's because of the interaction of the illness with the person. And so I treated every patient comprehensively by dealing with the underlying causes of immune dysregulation, immune deficiency. We can get into this later, but there are only 2 causes for all disease. It doesn't matter what the name of the disease is. And that's deficiency and toxicity. What does your body need that it doesn't have? And what does it have that it doesn't need? And if I replace what's needed and remove what's not, people get well. And so my sickest patients with COVID actually met clinical criteria for scurvy. They were so terribly vitamin C deficient. Many of them also, looked like they had pellagra, which is a B vitamin deficiency. Almost everybody was deficient in vitamin D. Almost everybody is deficient in vitamin A. And so when I replace these nutrients and remove some of the toxicity, right? So everybody that had severe COVID had a inflammatory toxicity. Many of them had a clotting toxicity. Their blood was clotting inappropriately. And so I just removed the things that were poisoning them, the clotting toxicity, the inflammation, replaced what their body need, and they all got well. And during the right at the beginning of COVID, I actually met with a major player in hospital medicine and offered to fund and staff my own study comparing my methods to standard of care, and they refused. They wouldn't let me do the study. Why that is, I'm not sure, but when you provide the body what it needs to heal, our bodies can heal. And I love to say we live inside a magical healing machine. And all I got to do is support this magical healing machine, and really good things happen. And so my COVID policy would be a comprehensive policy that focuses on the underlying causes of disease and using whatever tools I need to help a person heal based on that unique individual's, physiology. And that's going to be different. As a public health official, I'm not a public health person.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be me jumping into a very different role. But, all those off-label medications and things had some very reasonable approaches to it. And of course, I believe in the freedom of doctors, practitioners, anybody that calls themselves a practitioner or healer or whatever. I believe in the freedom of people to use their tools to help their neighbor. And that, that's one thing we really agree on is I think, individual freedom, as long as we're not breaking the principle of the non-aggression principle,
Exactly. Yes. And I think, again, as a layperson, hopefully somewhat informed, but still a layperson, I put more effort into reading about, the history of viruses and pandemics in the past. From the very beginning, I called it basically a pandemic of fear, and I think that was the only pandemic it should have been labeled as a pandemic of fear. But when I saw the government spend all this money to get these drugs approved, really quickly, that were really still, when they were approved, they were still experimental in nature, the mRNA vaccines, that by the time, the history of viruses tends to be, they're most lethal in the beginning, and as they mutate, to survive, so that they're more easy. They become more contagious. But as they become more contagious, they also become less lethal. So so more people will get it, but they'll get a less lethal mutation of it, because because generally when the first patients get it, you attack it with nuclear weapons to get rid of it. So then the virus figures out how to survive, and it figures out how to survive by being a little less lethal. And that way, if it's less lethal, it'll have more likely to spread and survive. So, so I always felt that by the time we spent all this money on the vaccine, by the time a vaccine was ready, which again was an experimental vaccine, which we really didn't even know what the side effects were of this vaccine. And I don't think we even knew if it was really effective or not, because there was not enough data to make a judgment about whether it was effective or not. By the time we were vaccinating people, basically for most of society, with the exception of a very small percentage, their immune systems have probably got to the point where they adapted to that most recent mutation of the virus, so that it would not be very toxic or lethal. So that I thought the whole spending all this money, for this, warp drive, whatever they called the program, to get these vaccines out in the marketplace, that I think the vaccines were, not only a waste of money, they probably not only been a waste of money, but counterproductive. So that's my sense as a layperson. Tell me where my logic is wrong, and correct anything that I've said that was really stupid.
Well, no, there's nothing that you said that's really stupid. But what we know about viruses is very little, and I would zoom out even further, right? Nobody asks these really important questions. Where do viruses, apart from nefarious activities of governments and militaries, right, which is of course where this happened, but apart from that, where do viruses come from? Where do they go? They come from inside us. It's rogue genetic material that lives in our gut, and our cells produce them. And also, this is going to sound like a really weird question, but I know this to be true with every fiber of my being. What is the benefit of any illness? So there's always a risk and a benefit to every illness, particularly natural illness, and to every treatment for every illness. So the discussions that people have on vaccines and on viruses are too zoomed in, and we need to zoom out more and ask these really careful questions. So I now I have a healthy immune system. You know, I want what everybody wants is healthy, vibrant life. Like people asked me all the time during COVID, well, should I get the vaccine? Should I not get the vaccine? I'm like, what do you want in life? Right? I want healthy, vibrant life. The only way to get immunity to an illness, there's only one way, and that's to be exposed to the illness.
Right.
And so
That's immunity.
That's the well. So even if you consider vaccine-induced immunity, you have to expose yourself to the illness. Now, the vaccine is not the same thing as the illness, and we know that because the data has already shown your risk of getting COVID flipped months later after you got the vaccine, and you're more likely to have symptoms of the illness than to be prevented from the illness if you got the vaccine. And so, really importantly, there is not a single vaccine that's ever been studied in a long-term safety study, not ever. And so, what are the long-term effects of stimulating the immune system with adjuvants and molecules that they put in there to aggravate the immune system on purpose? What are those long-term effects? That has never been studied. So, during COVID, I leaned in because I want to get exposed early and I want to get exposed often. And so that now I support my body, my immune system. I do lots of things to help myself stay healthy. And so the perfect situation is that we are continually exposed to all the things that are not harming us, right, in any significant way, so that we develop a tolerant, balanced, active immune system. So now this is part of the reinvention project, because the solution to all these problems is communities of people that love one another, that love, our neighbors and the earth and all these things, that care for what we're doing, educating each other and doing what's best for all of us in community. So, there is a portion of function of public health that has to be involved in every community medicine. I'm not sure that the governmental policy has ever been right.
Huh. How do you build that community? I mean, if the government's never going to be successful building communities. So, so how do you on an organic basis, how do you help provide the incentives for communities to be built where people voluntarily participate in the community because they think they're going to get something, a benefit that they value in return for their participation, in the community? So, I mean, many people find communities that they participate in, whether it's whether it's an Elks Club or a religious organization or some other group that they identify with and become a member of that group and participate in that group, and they build a bond with the people that they associate with. What kind of bond can people build in the neighborhoods we live in so that people and because it is a community. Ultimately, people live with the consequences. When you live in a community and kids go to school and the kids get each other sick and they go home and they get all the parents sick. So the contagion runs throughout the community. So you could take all the protective measures yourself, but that doesn't mean you can always protect yourself against whatever other people are doing that you have no control over. So if you live in an area where everybody on a voluntary basis, not a coercive basis, understands that the consequences of their actions don't only impact them and their immediate family, but impact other third parties, and that we should be, we should be concerned about, what we do and the consequence it has on others, not just ourselves. I remember I read this book. I forget the name of the book, from this written by this Yale law professor Stephen Carter. Years ago, I read the book. Got to be 30 years, something like that. So, and in the book, he talked about the difference between honesty and integrity, and why integrity was more important than honesty. So, honesty, he said, is telling just telling the truth. Whether it's nice, not nice, whether it'll offend somebody, not offend somebody, you just tell the truth. Integrity is being honest, but also being honest with the sensitivity of the consequences your words have on another person, where you want to say the truth, but you also want to be mindful of the consequences that has on another person, and you don't want to make sure that your words cause damage to a third party. You want your words to be helpful to third parties, not cause damage to third parties. And so somebody with integrity is somebody who also considers what the consequence of their words are to the people who are the recipient, of your words. I've always liked that concept of, one thing is just, one thing is just having feelings where you hate people just for hating people for whatever reasons you might hate them. And so you say, I hate you for this reason or that reason, and you're being honest. But the question is, do you have integrity? So, if you don't like somebody for a certain reason, why do you need to tell them that you don't like them for, that superficial reason that to you is not superficial? Because what do you get out of it? And why do you want to hurt somebody like that way? What's your gain, to hurt somebody that way? So, so you could say that person's an honest person, but it's a person that lacks integrity. If people have certain feelings, that are negative to somebody else, why do they need to say it? So they can feel it. They don't have to change what their own feelings are.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think having a lot of hate inside you, I think, is also toxic. Maybe as a doctor, you would say that's wrong. But I think the more negative things you feel, I think your body reacts to that. So
that's definitely a huge part of what I do here in my office. How that relates to what we're talking about in community, we are all, without our own choosing, part of a healthcare community. So, in the United States, we are forced to participate in the Medicaid and the Medicare nonsense and the FDA nonsense and the CDC and NIH and all that, right? We are participating in this very large, very powerful, influential, it affects our daily lives, that community.
This is interesting. If you were, if the FDA and all these things didn't exist, and there's a big pharma detail man, I think that's what they're called, right? The detail men who knock on your doors and peddle their drugs. What would you do if an FDA didn't exist, and somebody knocked on your door and I say, hi, I'm here from Merck or Pfizer or whatever other big pharma company out there, and said, I have this magic pill. Uh, what vetting, what due diligence? How would the medical profession deal with detail men going and having these pharmaceutical companies having their doors knocked on, asking them to peddle these drugs? What would the due diligence doctors would be doing, knowing that they have malpractice where people could sue them for malpractice, so that
Mm,
ultimately now the responsibility for the drug you prescribe would now fall on the medical doctor, given the fact that they would be prescribing drugs that had no formal FDA approval. So then the doctor would have to explain why they chose to give that. What due diligence did the doctor do in order to prescribe that specific medicine? So how would you go about vetting all these people coming on telling you they have all these magic pills?
mm.
If an FDA didn't exist. And I'm not saying that to support the FDA. I don't support government at all.
Yeah.
So
So
I,
right.
I, I want the responsibility to be with the doctor and the patient. I don't want to allocate any responsibility to mommy and daddy government. I don't want a maternalistic or paternalistic state. So I want adult individuals, who understand that the responsibility falls upon them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I totally agree. Right. So what would happen? I mean, to answer your question briefly, is that private organizations would rise up, and people would have to trust who they determined was honorable. And so this is one of the things that is we have to create in the reinvention of medicine, because the FDA, right? Just if I take out all the evil talk and I just say, like, just forget, it's not evil, it's not wrong, let's just call it what it is objectively, right? The FDA serves the purposes of the pharmaceutical manufacturers, the device manufacturers, and the American Medical Association that writes guidelines, and other guideline producing entities to within their own system, right?
mhm.
So so the FDA does its job very well. It looks at they spend billions of dollars trying to prove that a drug does this thing or that thing, and they say it's safe within our reasonable understanding, and then they release it for a purpose, right? Okay. So what we have to do is privately, like, we've been doing medicine for thousands of years. And so my patients trust me because I know what I'm doing, because I have some experience, because they talked to their neighbor who said, this guy fixed my allergies, and this guy fixed my cancer, and this guy fixed my autism and my Parkinson's, right? So there's a community. We're all part of the community, whether we like it or not. Right now, we're you know unwillingly, most of us, paying into this system that went bankrupt 50 years ago. Right? Uh, Medicare can't fund for its liabilities in a system that doesn't even do very good medicine. So, so the private system would rise up, which is people would trust. My patients know that I love them.
Mhm.
Um, People come to see me because they know that the people that I train love this work, and they've taken some of their own due diligence to prove that what they're doing makes sense. And I don't need a randomized controlled trial that cost $1 billion to prove that exercise is beneficial.
It's interesting. Speaking, it reminds me of the fact that when I made my primary residence in New York, uh, I had I guess it's called concierge care. I guess is
Mm-hmm.
this called? So I had a concierge care,
Right.
and I found that my concierge care physician was much less inclined to prescribe medicine. That mostly uh, relied a lot on strengthening my immune system, was typically his response to when I had some of the chronic illnesses that I had. He was frustrated that when he would ask me to do testing to understand more on what were the roots of my problems, that I was not very cooperative and never did the tests he asked me to do. So I didn't think my problems were acute enough for me to have any curiosity about making myself healthier. And maybe that's a bad judgment on my part, but uh, but I had noticed when I went to him, he was very reluctant to ever medicine for me. He almost never wrote. I don't even recall him really writing a prescription for me. So he was always looking to give me things that did not require prescriptions, and mostly it was all about the strengthening of my own immune system. He didn't want a drug solving the problem. He wanted to boost my immune system, so my immune system would solve the problem, and not the drug. So I liked the care. And then you go into other offices where they see you, they check out your symptoms, they give you 30 medicines to take, and assuming that one of them might work, and if they throw enough at you, something will work, and hopefully the combination doesn't kill you or cause so many other side effects. And that their approach is to try and provide as quick symptomatic relief as you can, but really they haven't gone to the root cause of the problem. And the focus of your medicine is really you'd like to have people symptomatic relief, but you like the symptomatic relief as a product of solving the root cause problem. So your goal is not solving the symptomatic relief. Your goal is to attack the root cause of the problem. And most of medicine is just there to provide symptomatic relief, and really have never, as you said earlier, have much curiosity about root cause. So how do people begin a relationship with your clinics? Why don't you talk about the clinics you have, and your plans on expanding your brand of providing health care that would create better outcomes at lower costs.
So right now, so just to address some of the things that you said, you're exactly right. Like, that's a good doctor that doesn't just readily write prescriptions. I still write prescriptions, but very few doctors in the conventional medical system are looking at downstream effects that could be potentially harmful, not just for the patient. Like what does a round of antibiotics, cause? It might help somebody with a sinus infection, but antibiotics cause a measurable risk to the person taking the antibiotics. And we have a major crisis that's looming right now with antimicrobial resistance in the world. And the pharmaceutical medical industry has nothing, absolutely nothing, to address that issue. And in fact, the whole model is wrong, because antibiotics caused the antimicrobial resistance. You cannot have another antibiotic solve the problem of antimicrobial resistance. The thing that causes the problem won't solve it. And so it's a major, major problem that is $1 trillion problem, and they have nothing. In my communities, we actually have the solution for that problem, because our individual health of our body, our microbiome and our immune system, and the community that we build with a robust, healthy microbiome and immune system, that's the solution to the problem of worldwide antimicrobial resistance, because of antibiotics in our food and our water and our toilet water, because everybody's over antibiotic. So to answer your specific question, right now I only have one clinic here in San Antonio, and we're going to be growing soon all over the country, collaborating with doctors, using the framework that I use that provides a consistently deliverable product for helping patients to both prevent disease and get well from their sometimes chronic, debilitating, severe disease. And so my website for the clinic is rootcauses.com. The foundation website is rootcauses.org. The movie that I just released is intoxicatedmovie.com. That's a movie that describes, it's a documentary short that's trying to introduce people to these very big ideas so that they can begin to understand how we are all related in health and disease. You and I, Jeffrey, even though we live thousands of miles apart, we can't extract ourselves from our connection in community, because the governments, the manufacturers, the chemical companies, the food suppliers and shippers and truckers and all these people that make our society what it is are either promoting disease or promoting health. And we are all intimately connected in this mysterious web of life. And so that's where we have to get together. Those of us that are, curious about health, we have to get together and grow this community so that we can, for the sake of our children, if nothing else, create a healthier society.
What do you think for for patients to be better informed? Is there literature? Is there anything you think that they should be reading so that they have, better knowledge? It's like, unfortunately, in life, everybody has their expertise, and then everybody's going to rely upon other third parties would have a different expertise. And then the question is how do you vet other third parties? How do you find a good doctor? How do you find a good lawyer? How do you find a good accountant? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that, is word of mouth. With somebody that had a good experience and they share with somebody else who then shares it with somebody else. But ultimately, the likelihood that we'll have good outcomes, the more we know, the better we'll get at choosing the third parties we trust. So, if I knocked on your door and said, I want to become a patient at your clinic, what could you suggest that I read that would make me a better patient, because it would make me, more knowledgeable about my body? Is there any things that you could suggest that people read on a regular basis so that they keep, pretty well informed?
Yeah, it's great question. I mean, so my book's coming out in June. The pre-order is on my website at rootcauses.org. I'm part of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and so Mark Hyman is one of our former presidents. Things that he talks about are super important and worth listening to. He has a couple of books out which are worth reading. That's Mark Hyman, Hyman. Rangan Chatterjee, Dr. Chatterjee is a guy, a friend of mine. He's in the UK. He has probably the most popular podcast on health and wellness, and several books that I can very comfortably recommend. He's a great guy, a good doctor, and talks about some of the underlying causes of disease. And then, of course, there's a lot of noise on social media, really tough because most of these people are promoting some sort of product, or they're affiliate marketing some sort of product. And so this is one of my missions with the Reinvention Project, is delivering consistent education that makes sense and empowering people. So this is what I'm going to be doing over the next coming years. Is there's tons of people talking about the problem, like how COVID and the nonsense with the vaccines and the nonsense with medicine and all those rules, but they're not really providing very many good options. The solution is local communities with trusted people delivering, with good tools, good education, and good options for prevention and for treatment. And so that's what I'm going to be doing over the coming years. It's hard to weed through all the noise. Most of the products that people are marketing are not great products. Most of them miss the point. And we got to have these clinics in these communities everywhere to give people really good options, actually. So
there seems to be a big business out of, and I don't want to just name like one person like Alex Jones, because he's not the only one that does it. But there are a lot of people who are out there hawking their vitamins and the special pills they get and stuff like that. I don't know what they do to validate its efficacy. I
mean, that's a great example. People send me supplement questions all the time. They're like, what do you think? Should I take this supplement? It's good evidence, really good evidence, that there's a problem when Alex Jones, God love him and respect him for the work he's done. I'm not saying anything negative about that. I'm just saying Alex Jones,
I don't mean to be critical of him. So,
but he's got a supplement company.
Yes.
So what that tells you is that there is money to be made by people making supplements. Most of these supplement companies, they're large manufacturers that private label various things. They're all coming from the same place. Nestle and Pepsi and the pharmaceutical companies, I'm sure, own some of them now because there's a lot of money to be made, and it's poorly regulated. Now, regulation is not the fix, right? The fix is a provider who loves their patient, a community of people. There is no way I could sell somebody a product that was going to harm them or that was worthless. I couldn't do it. It breaks my basic code of ethics. And so that's the solution. Other providers in a community caring for their patients. And when we have, I manufacture some products and I use them in my patients. And that's the key. And if you can get a bottle of pills for $60, I can tell you it's probably worthless. Because, I know what it costs to manufacture a quality product. It's expensive. And so, it's tough. Most of our nutrition, by the way, should come from our food. Food that's nutritious just smokes in the dust any pill. But the trouble is you can't get healthy food. So this is the reason why I have the farm. So every community clinic is going to be tied to a local farm that grows food and a kitchen that cooks food, because it's cheaper, it's more efficient to have 1,000 people buying good food from one kitchen than it is to have 1,000 kitchens cooking food, right? And so our food should nourish us. Conventionally grown food that's shipped across the country does not nourish us. It doesn't. It can't. It has to be local. It has to be regenerative soil. It has to be, this is why there is a market for supplements, and there always will be, because our food system is messed up until we fix that. But man, there's a lot of noise out there. Most of social media is noise. Most people that are talking about this sort of thing are selling something to someone. Now, and people have said, well, Derek, you're selling something too. And it's true. I'm selling an idea. I'm selling the truth, which is we are all in this together. I can't separate myself from my community. If all these people out here don't turn their car engines off and they just run their gas guzzler 24 hours a day, they're putting more mercury in the air that I have to breathe. And I'm mercury toxic, which is why I'm a doctor. And so like, I have to educate people to, turn your car off and walk underneath a tree and sit and wait.
That's it's a good point. I don't even own a car, so
Oh, I love that.
I love to walk. There's always Uber when it's absolutely necessary, but I don't own the car, so I stopped driving years ago, and I'm happy to spend more of my time walking, and think it's much healthier. And I always say, I'm not sure about uh, climate change, so I don't really want to change so much of my life because of climate change. But there is a risk that I could be wrong. That there's nothing to worry about. So the question is what can I do? The fact is, if I'm wrong, I'm screwing up the life of my grandchildren. And so the question is just in case there's that possibility I could be wrong, what steps should I take now, just in case I am wrong, to basically not leave a worse world for them than I do for myself? Because that's what I always tell a lot of people. When I since I always think like an economist, and everything to me is risk management. When people come to me, and I used to do venture capital. I used to do a lot of venture capital, and so when I came to people, when people came to me, pitching me why I should invest in them, I would always say, I structure my deals very different. I want you to make a lot more money if you are successful than any other venture capitalist out there. Okay, a lot more. It's not like you'll make a little more. With me, you'll make a lot more if you're really successful. But you're also going to feel more pain if you fail. So not necessarily a lot more pain, but you will feel pain. So of every 10 people that came to pitch me, once I told them that, they went looking for somebody else to provide them capital. So they were looking for the upside, but they weren't willing to absorb. And what was the type of pain? I told them I would generally find them saying, I want you. I said, you gotta. I said, you do you own any stocks? So I said, yeah, I own some stocks and bonds. Well, I say, do you think the stocks and bonds are a better investment than the idea you're pitching me? So I said, I'm trying to figure out, should I buy your stock portfolio or should I invest in your business? So if you have more money in your stock portfolio than in your business, then you're telling me that you really think your stock portfolio is a better bet than your own business, because your own money is not in your business but in your stock portfolio. So tell me, what should I bet on, this, your stock portfolio or your business? So I would always have people sell half their stock holdings to put into the business. So, and the other thing I did was, I would require that when I would basically have them show me their budget of how they lived, and I would tell them, I'm not going to change your lifestyle very much, but if you were taking 2 really nice vacations a year, you're now only going to take 1 not so nice vacation, because I wanted them to have the sweat equity in the business, because I wanted their interest aligned with mine. I didn't want them saying, whether this fails or not, there's no downside for me. So I wanted them to consider that there was downside. So I wanted to know how much they believed in what they were doing. So I always think about everything from a risk management perspective and how people have skin in the game, because how people behave when they have skin in the game, is very, very different than when they don't have the skin in the game. And I think that's probably the whole problem with, many of our systems of dealing with any third parties. No offense to you or to any other profession, but ultimately, our lawyers, our doctors, our accountants, all the third parties we rely upon for really important matters ultimately have no skin in the game. So whether their advice works or not, you pay them. So
It's true.
I'm averse to since I made my money trading, so I traded my own money. So if I made good trades, I could celebrate and had more money in my pocket. If I made bad trades, whatever success I had was my personal success, and the money went to me. Whatever failure I had no impact on anybody else other than me. So whatever I did, I lived with the consequences of my own actions, and so I believe that the best thing is when people have skin in the game. That's how you reflect real preferences. I don't know how we can design a healthcare system, where people, you might have doctors who might reject shitty patients, if you have a shitty patient who doesn't follow your instructions, then you're going to get bad outcomes. So the reality is that for if you have a patient that comes in, and let's say if all your treatments were on a blockchain, so every patient that came in, there was a public ledger of that patient, what they did, and the outcome that they had. The problem that you might have is if you tell the patient to do a whole bunch of things and they don't do what you tell them to do, and they don't get the outcome they have, then the question is, is the doctor at fault or is the patient at fault? And from what I understand, there are a lot of patients, I don't know how many, who don't really follow what the doctors tell them to do.
Yeah.
So then the question is should the doctor be, responsible for the outcome of a patient, that
Of course not.
that the patient doesn't follow? But then the question is how can we have a healthcare system where maybe the doctors, compensation is somewhat tied to the outcome of the treatment, to the extent that that's really possible. And
Yeah. Well,
so we can align incentives, much better. I never like a relationship where there's not good incentive alignment. So I tend to not rely upon people's word. I tend to rely upon aligning incentives, and I think that's the best disciplining device from bad behavior. So that whatever happens to me happens to you. Whatever happens to you happens to me. That there's never a conflict of interest. That our interests are completely aligned. All the time. And and I think that's the best way of when we talk about building a community. That's what you always hope a community has, of people who have well aligned interests. It doesn't mean that people won't agree, but whatever disagreements will never be because there's a conflict of interest between them. So
you bring up a great point.
Excuse me.
You bring up a great point. So skin in the game, right? To bring that back to the vaccine discussion, vaccine manufacturers have no liability. They literally could. So the COVID vaccine, let's just use that one as example. Let's just say they delivered 100 million doses and 100 million people died right after the dose, immediately within 5 minutes. The liability for those manufacturers would have been nothing.
Yeah, the structure of the incentives that were given to pharmaceutical companies is absurd. They were able to make tons of money selling something that was not proven that would be effective. We don't even know whether it was effective.
That was mandated.
And if people died because of it, they'd have no so it was heads I win, tails you lose. So
yeah, they always won. Now the other thing is true too. The doctors, I'm not suggesting this, but there have been some that have suggested that the doctors who recommended the treatment that was dangerous should be held liable. It brings up an interesting point because most of the doctors have not even read the insert for the medications that they're recommending, regardless of what the medication is. The insert is very clear about some of the risks to these medications, including vaccines. And so they just look at the guideline and say you're supposed to get it. But the system that I'm building actually fixes all of those problems. So it is a blockchain. It's not electronic, but we know right now, if you lined up 10, 50-year-old men, right, and you put them from the shortest to the tallest, the fattest to the skinniest, who looks the oldest to who looks the youngest, right? We have an objective reality. You know, who's more sedentary, who's more active, who eats, whatever. There's all these different ways. And in this system, and the system that I'm building in the reinvention, sick people subsidize healthy people's care, which is an economic requirement to get more healthy people. If you subsidize sick people, right, which is what our system does now, it's an economic law. You will get more sick people until the system fails. This is just going to continue to happen until the system will fail, and it will fail. But when you subsidize healthy people, the sick people pay for healthy people's care. It's readily obvious who's sick and who's healthy. It's readily obvious who's doing what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. Now, for me, I tell people what to do. We're all on our own journey. Nobody's perfect, but we are held accountable by our own outcome. Right.
Right.
Now, some of this is, obviously you're not in control of everything that's happening in your environment, but the more people that we get into the community, the more control we have over a large portion of the things that are causing illness. So, I think what you're saying holds a lot of weight. We got to have people with skin in the game. Right now, I mean, I don't know what the number is. I would venture to say 90% of the expenditures in healthcare in the United States are waste. They go to regulators. They go to insurance companies that provide absolutely no healthcare. They go to research. They go to research for things that are never approved. For every drug that's approved, there's probably 10 that's not approved. And all that's built in to the cost of our FDA and NIH and Medicare and CDC, right? It's all waste. And so when you get a private system where people are paying in with skin in the game for their own healthcare, and sick people are paying for healthcare and healthy people are paying less just to be in the community, you're subsidizing healthy people. You're providing the tools to get well, to prevent illness. I mean, this is the only way.
Yeah, I remember the talk that Bobby gave at the at the dinner we met at, and where he talked about, if you looked at videos of people walking around when his uncle, JFK, was president.
Yeah.
You didn't see so many obese people, not so much incidence of the type of diseases they have now. And I read that there are some explanations for that. One is, and again, I don't want this to be, an attack on the feminist movement, because I think every individual has the same right to fulfill whatever their dreams in life are. But that when there was when people were having home cooked meals with housewives at home, cooking meals. And again, I'm not advocating that we should go back to that era, but apparently as convenience became more important, because we went from a single parent earner to both parents working, that basically people's diets changed. And maybe as a consequence of people's diets changed, there's been some change in not only people's health, but maybe even their cognitive development. So I mean, I've read some studies, that assert that. So I don't know how much the farm the ag business has changed with GMOs and other products. So I don't know the whole ecosystem that's built about how much of that has made us be able to feed more people, but also make us less healthy. The people we're feeding more people, but we're also making a less healthy population. So but there's got to be some explanation on why certain things were not so prevalent 60 years ago that are very prevalent today. And also part of the change might have occurred back from FDR's period. And what I refer to FDR is that previously there was not the linkage between people's work and their health and their insurance. Basically once the government put wage and price controls, then companies figured out how to innovate in giving some sort of compensation to people in non-wage form. But in the past, it used to be, I wasn't responsible for giving you, a pension plan or any of this stuff. I give you a salary, and you figure out your life on the salary that you have. You go out and buy healthcare. And in that world, doctors used to come and make house calls. They would stay and talk. They weren't looking at their watch, saying next. After having, a few minutes with you. So I don't know, so there might be a whole bunch of all these contributing factors, that make us a less healthy society. And really the externality, the cost associated with this, could be much, much higher than us trying to figure out how to solve the problem. The difficulty in trying to solve the problem is there's so much money being made by so many people in the system as it does today, and they're so powerful politically. How do you reform a system, when the people who are benefiting off a system that creates these type of perverse outcomes, have are making so much money, and they're using that money to corrupt the most mediocre government money can buy. So how do you ultimately it's up to us to be informed, and again take responsibility for our own lives, rather than looking for saviors in our life to do that. Sometimes I'm always very, very surprised, and maybe the fault is mine and not other people. But like this is maybe a little off topic, but it's still making the point of our own individual responsibility and how our system has structural problems. I read, like, for an example, that that in many major cities now, the probability that crimes get solved are very low. So crime pays more now than it used to pay in the past, because you might get sent to El Salvador if you get caught, but the odds are you're not getting caught. So because I read the data on how many crimes are solved, and how many crimes are committed. And from what I read, the statistics are indicating that right now the police force have and it's kind of peculiar, because the police force right now is probably better armed than they've ever been in history, and they have more surveillance technology. So you'd assume that you have a better armed police force, and all the money we're throwing at law enforcement, and all the surveillance tools that we have, that we would be more successful at mitigating crimes and solving crimes. But that's not the case. And I don't mean this as an indictment of the police. I'm just trying to sit back and say, when people said, like, defund the police, I would say I support defunding the police, and I'm for defunding police, not necessarily for defunding security. And why am I, like, for defunding the police? One is, there are actually legal cases out there that if like a crime is going on, and a policeman has not been necessarily as proactive as they should be to try and do something about it, when they've been sued for, like, negligence, they've been acquitted. Part of it is this qualified immunity, and part of it is actually, while you can see on the door to serve and protect, the courts have determined that the job of the police is not actually to serve and protect. So they have no legally binding obligation to serve and protect. They don't, okay, according to jurisprudence. So, so when I talk to like people who, former cops, I'd sit back and say, look, if you're designing a system from scratch, I have a couple of choices out there. I have a whole bunch of people who were cops. And what if every community fired all the cops? But then all the cops could go out there and build their own private security companies, and private securities can go out. But now, at least, who does the private security contract serve? They serve the community that hires them. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not that so it's not like I don't want security. It's not like I don't want protection. I want to be able to hire the people that are providing my protection. I want to be able to interview them. I want to be able to fire them if I find them incompetent. Okay, and I want to make sure that whatever contract has been signed with them, okay, that they understand their primary responsibility is to serve that and protect the community. And I would end the contract. Your job is to serve and protect. If you don't serve and you don't protect, you're negligent. Okay, and I'm coming after you. So so then if some community member, every community member who then complains about a cop, whoever that security person is, that policeman knows that community person is the one that can hire or fire them. So be responsive. If you go onto the street and somebody else, and I'm saying there's a lot of great cops out there, I've spoken to police, most of them are great people, but the reality is, they know there's no relationship between my attitude towards them and them being able to keep their job. So if they understood their job was contingent upon making sure the community that they are representing, are happy with them, then the relationship changes. So, so somehow people get used to liking these monopolies. Of course, everybody, if you're a policeman, you like being a monopoly where you have a whole bunch of people that are unionized and you can, threaten the government to get all these great benefits, and then scare the population that the only choice you have for security is a police force rather than a whole bunch of security companies made up of former cops, and I would assume the good cops know who the good cops are and they know who the bad cops are. So the good cops that know who are the good cops are, they'd probably want to build their own security company of only good cops, and then they would know they would get a lot of business.
Mm-hmm.
And the bad cops they would want to associate with because they know that would not be good for business. And pretty much we would know who the good cops are and the bad cops are because the cops themselves would choose who the good cops are, and because they know who the good ones are and the bad ones. And I'm assuming most are good. So I don't want to make an assumption that these are bad people. I'm saying they're probably decent people with bad incentives. So rather than the right incentives. So think about that. Think about the healthcare system. Is we have all these perverse incentives. So the question is how do you clean up a system? And going back to your comment is the fact that we basically got to junk the whole system. So how do we build a movement to get people to convince that this system is not about tweaking, okay? It's about junking, and because that was like almost your first comment, right? That we got to replace the system. We can't pretend that there are incremental, marginal fixes to the system. The whole fucking system, sorry, my wife, is broken, and we got to redesign it from scratch. So
yes, that's my example.
And that's what you're trying to do is to get people into your ecosystem and expand your clinics so you can build a parallel universe of real healthcare and not sick care, and hopefully you can build a model that when it has a more scaled success, that you have more people who will be advocates for that type of reform of the system.
Yes, this is the model. The nice part in this, your analogy fits perfectly, actually, because the solution does not lie with the FDA, with the CDC, with the medical boards, with the medical associations. The nice part, as it is currently, is that we actually have the power. And like, this is what I'm trying to do, is empower people. And the new system will thrive on a fraction of the waste in the old system. And so, and there's plenty of profit. I mean, there's plenty of, personally, it's hard for me to profit. This is my passion project, so I don't profit. I haven't yet anyway on this at all. It feels unethical to make tremendous profit on a 5-year-old with leukemia, right? Like, we as a people should agree that, like right now, I mean, United Healthcare, for instance, $260 billion of revenue to provide no healthcare, right? Many, many hundreds of millions of dollars of profit, and $250 billion worth of waste for one of the big 5 health insurers. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So we actually have the power. People in communities taking control of their own healthcare destiny in a community of people with some trusting, loving, experienced, wise health practitioners with the tools to help them get well, stay well, or prevent disease. We have all the power in that, and it can be easily privatized. And not only that, it must be, because the system is going to fail. And that what's going to happen is, like in any other big thing, it happens really, really slowly, and then all of a sudden. And the thing that started back in the 60s and 70s, when we tied employment to health insurance and HMOs and third-party payers, and then coding and AMA and all these ICD-9 and 10 codes and all this nonsense that provides no value to anyone, right? The foundation is already cracking. Actually, it's worse than that. It's non-existent. The foundation is not there. We're floating on a house of air above cards. I mean, it's nothing, right? It will happen because the money goes away. The economics, eventually you run out of other people's money, right? The
Right.
classic saying. And it's going to happen all of a sudden at some point in the future. It's not even worth considering reforming it.
I think one person told me, and I don't know whether I'm remembering well what he told me. This is a friend of mine who's an economist, but his specialty is health economics, that many hospitals are very dependent upon, for their survival, of the payouts they get from Medicare and Medicaid. And that
all of them.
And if there's any significant change in those payments, that a lot of hospitals will go bankrupt. So that the fragility of the economics of many hospitals, so I guess ultimately, given the fact that hospitals, I guess, and assume the incidence of payments to hospitals, I guess certain people are paying most of cover the cost of the hospital, because the hospital's forced to take a whole bunch of other patients on terms that they lose money on. So the patients so they have to make more money off the patients they don't make money off to continue to stay in business. So that's so it's kind of it ends up being a big wealth transfer to some extent. That patients that have money are helping keep not only helping keep the hospitals afloat, they're helping to provide the hospitals the extra money that the Medicare and the Medicaid is not giving to cover the cost of the other patients they're forced to take on at losses. I mean, so when you think about that, is how fragile is the whole healthcare system? if so many hospitals, go under just based upon if the government just changes makes, not even a very large change, that reduction of their payouts to these hospitals, how many hospitals become non-viable? I mean, so we've we have dam that has so many holes in it. We keep trying to put our fingers in all the holes, but eventually there'll be more holes than we have fingers. And so, as you said, we'll have these little leaks, and then eventually the dam will break. So, I mean, that's pretty much what you said in a different way. So,
and we're already seeing lots more holes than we have fingers to put in the dam. And so that's why it's pretty essential to have another system, already there so that we can just migrate to it. And this, it's not a fear-mongering situation. We have the solutions to these problems. Health is extraordinarily complex, and some people love to keep it that way. People don't understand what's making them sick and what's making them healthy. But it really is simple when you boil it down, and we have the solution. That's what the topic of my book, and as I come out on social media a little bit more, and hopefully we can have more conversations to try to get people to understand how much power they have and to take their power back and stop giving it. We give it away. We give our power away every time we write our check to the insurance company, and every time, we're just giving our power away. And not only that, really our grandchildren's power, because the system is so bankrupt. I mean, all these things are going to have, these contracts are null and void. They're going to have to be rewritten because there isn't enough money in the universe, as far as we know, in the known universe, to pay for these liabilities.
How will people find your book? Will it be on like Amazon? Or is it going to be
well, I'm still working that deal out right now. You can put your name on a list on my foundation website, rootcauses.org.
Okay, well, I would like to, as a way of thanking you for being my guest today, I would like to, for all of you watching, the first 15 people that write to Johnny, Jonny, at bitshoot.com. Again, that's JONNY at bitshoot, BITCHUTE.com. If you write Johnny requesting Derek's book, I will pay to have the book sent to you, the first 15 people. So I'd like to help more people read your book, Derek. So I will personally pay for 15 people, the first 15 people that write into Johnny wanting to read your book. And the video, the film that you have, when will that be distributed, and how will you be distributing that?
So right now you can stream it on the website intoxicatedmovie.com. Intoxicatedmovie.com. That's sort of an introduction to the framework and to the communities. So both these things are still in the deal making stage on how they're going to be widely released, but the streaming site is up, and you can watch the movie there.
Okay, so maybe we can put a link on to your site where, so people can who watch this and become aware of it, that we create a link so that it's easy for people to link straight from BitChute onto your site to watch the video.
That'd be great. Yeah, and I just got Johnny to help me with the BitChute channel, so I'm going to start uploading some content and trying to help empower people to take control of their own health again and their community. We're all in this together, and you can't separate yourself. It doesn't matter how healthy you are. If you're the healthiest person on your block or in your city, you can't separate yourself from the people near you. And so we are all tied together, and our health destinies are intertwined. So,
do you have any ability for people to reach out to you with questions? How, if people watch this and want to get to know you better and have questions, and talk about something, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Probably right now it's going to be difficult. Maybe if you go to the rootcauses.com, that's the clinic website, and just send an email there, rootcauses.com. You can send a little submission form.
Okay, great. Well, what would it be? I always like to give my guests the last words. So how would you like to conclude this conversation? And again, thank you so much, Derek.
Well, I appreciate you. I think, I'm excited about this platform because health and freedom are so tied together. And we have to break free from our oppressors so that we can be truly healthy and connecting together, because we are the solution. So it's so essential that we connect together around true things, talking about the truth, arguing about it, figuring out what it is by talking, maybe sometimes arguing. And so I'm really excited about this platform. So thank you for bringing me on, and we're going to grow it together. Going to be a lot of good conversations, I think.
I'm looking forward to that very much. And thank you so much. And just have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, you too. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Bye, Derek.